Welcome to the Real Estate Espresso Podcast, your morning shot of what's new in the world of real estate investing. I'm your host, Victor Menashe. This is the weekend edition where we interview notable people from the world of real estate investing. Today is no exception. We have a great guest, but first, a quick chat about goal setting. Goal setting is one of the most important aspects to achieving anything in life. If you don't know where you're going, you might end up someplace else. I'd like to invite you to join me for 3 days on the Mexican Riviera for an intensive goal setting retreat so that you start your 2020 with energy, purpose, focus, and momentum. The annual goal setting retreat will take place over the first weekend in December. Registration is now open. You can register directly at victorjm.com/events. That's victorjm.com/events. Or send an email to goals@victorjm.com. That's goals@victorjm.com. We are back here on the weekend edition. We interview notable people from the world of real estate investing. Today, we've got a great guest all the way from Los Angeles, California. Welcome to the show, Allie Boone.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited. And man, I love the concept of your podcast and the name of it. I'm so excited to be part of it.
Oh, thank you, Allie. So for the listeners who don't know you, I know you've been on quite a few shows, but if they haven't heard from you before, why don't you give a little bit of your backstory and how you got into this crazy world of real estate investing?
Boy, isn't that the question of the day? I sometimes ask myself that same question. My background is in aerospace engineering, actually. That's what my degree was in, and I started into that as my career. And from the minute I set foot in my first cubicle, despite how cool of a job that was, I was doing really cool stuff like top secret military flight tests. It really was the dream job. But the minute I walked into that first cubicle, I wanted out. It just, despite how cool it was not my thing. I've always wanted to be in business for myself, and I really didn't know how I was going to get out of corporate. I had some conceptual ideas, but it took about 5 years of really researching. I was reading every book I got my hands on, business books, real estate books, just trying to figure out my path out. I had certain skill sets. I was a pilot at the time. I was a flight instructor working that job, but it wasn't really something to sustain me as a career level salary. And through all of that research, I kind of came to the conclusion that it was either going to be business or real estate investing. I didn't know what in either of those necessarily, but those seemed to be the two main areas that could get people out of working for somebody else. So I had actually decided to go the business route. I had no idea what business to start, but a couple weeks later, just randomly, a real estate investment webinar announcement thing landed in my inbox, and I was bored and I watched it, and it was a really cool deal. It was actually in a third world country, Nicaragua, and I thought that seemed awfully rebellious, and I love anything rebellious. I pursued it, and not really thinking it would actually be, I thought it was a scam, but it turned out to be a real thing. I ended up buying into it, and that was my first investment, and it was also my first failed investment, which was also one for the books. But through that, the people I started meeting that were real estate investors just in this industry, really one thing led to another. The connections started happening, and a lot of the guys that were involved in this Nicaragua project were also involved in turnkey rental properties at the time. And I hadn't thought about them much for myself, but at the same time this was happening, Atlanta became a huge investors market, 2011, 2012, and I was from Atlanta. The guys approached me and said, hey, just a heads up, if you've ever thought about a turnkey, Atlanta's about to be the market. And I thought, well, that seems like a better start with an area I'm familiar with than a third world country. And I kind of unexpectedly bought my first turnkey. I was hooked immediately. And through that buying experience, I continued to buy more and more. And I was telling everybody about it, and it ended up forming my company, Hipster Investments, which is essentially a referral and matchmaker type of company. Also, I've turned into an emotional support dog, as I realize is now also my job description. And really getting people into this turnkey concept, because it made such a difference for my own investing, because I never wanted to swing hammers or spend a lot of time on my investments like so many people do. So I started telling people about it. Bigger Pockets picked me up as a writer, and everything just snowballed from there. And now 7 years later, I'm still running Hipster, and it's been nothing but excitement the whole time. It's been quite a journey. So real estate, it's definitely something for me. I wasn't completely expecting it, but that's how I got here.
I love it. I love it. Well, you're in a space right now where there's certainly a demand in the marketplace. Single family homes, a lot of people grew up in single family homes, and home ownership in the country is down. It's down from the peaks quite significantly. And so there are definitely a lot of lifelong renters, folks who maybe it's because they're saddled with too much student debt that, aren't paying off their student debt until they're well into their 40s. And at that point, they've been renting for so long, they still want to live in a single family home. They don't want to live in a fourplex. They don't want to live perhaps in a multi-hundred unit apartment complex.
Right.
And so the demand is certainly there for both good quality, affordable, single family homes.
Yeah, definitely. It really is. And I'm one of those people. I rent my apartment. I have multiple investment properties and I rent where I live. I'm of the belief that owning a primary home is not at all the investment we all grew up thinking it was. So yeah, there's a lot of people kind of figuring that out. And yeah, for all the reasons you mentioned, single families are, and when you own single family as a landlord or an investor, you are oftentimes attracting a higher quality of tenant. And one of the first things that can tank your investment is bad tenants. So all my investments, I really focus on properties that are going to hopefully attract the people that are going to give me a lot fewer headaches down the road.
I love that. It's funny you should mention that because we ourselves are even contemplating, we have a beautiful home that we live in here and we've owned it for now, 15 years at least. And it's not our first home that we've owned. And we ourselves are asking the question, would we be better off liquidating, renting a smaller place, and putting that capital to work into other projects and effectively house hacking, using the income from those other projects to essentially zero out our home ownership cost?
Yeah, absolutely. And for anyone pondering that, a lot of it comes down to where you live. Like every city is going to have different dynamics as far as property prices and rent. Like I'm in Los Angeles and it's so much cheaper for me to rent my place here than to buy somewhere. And people they don't, even if you think about mortgage interest, like you mentioned house hacking, like that's one way to kind of make up for that mortgage interest thing. But when you're not house hacking and you buy a primary home, it's like, oh, well, it's going to appreciate. Well, that's cool. But how much are you paying in mortgage interest? That's the big one people forget about. And then expenses and improvements and stuff. And so a lot of it is going to come down to where you live as far as what's going to be the cheaper way for you to live and make your money work in the best way for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're obviously not doing turnkey rentals in Los Angeles. It's far too expensive a market. How do you make that work? Obviously turnkey rentals requires boots on the ground expertise. There's no such thing as passive income. You're trying to take an active business and make it appear as a passive income stream, but there's a whole lot of work that goes on in between those two statements. So where does that all happen?
So that all happens on someone else's shoulders, which is my favorite part of turnkeys. So I live in Los Angeles and all of my turnkeys, and most people buying turnkeys are out-of-state owners or investors, because if you live in a market that cash flows well, there's not really any reason to buy a turnkey because you're going to pay a little bit more money for them. But when you're buying out of state, the advantage of doing that, obviously, kind of as we've kind of circled around a little bit, is the entry prices are easier. The cash flow is higher. Like in Los Angeles, there is no cash flow. So it allows you to be a lot more advantageous with your investing, but it is that question of doing it out of state. How do you do that out of state? And the thing with turnkeys is they're not perfect. You're right. There's not anything existing that's 100% hands-off, but turnkeys try to get you as close to hands-off as possible. And with someone else doing the hard work, which is the rehabbing, finding the distressed properties and property management, tenants, all that, all of the bulk of the work that goes into this rental property is done for you. Your job at that point is really, I call it managing the manager. Like you've got to keep an eye on things and you're not 100% hands-off. You need to be willing to step in and make a decision, or if you need to fire your property management company and hire a new one, if you need to call insurance for some kind of damage or repair or something, you need to be willing to do that, but all of that is pretty easy from long distance. Like I always say, there's never been a problem on any of my turnkeys that I haven't been able to handle over the phone, which is huge. And that includes hiring and firing property managers. So as long as I'm willing to manage the properties, what I don't have to do with turnkeys and any rental property set up with property management is I don't have to fix toilets. I don't have to take tenant calls. I don't have to do any of that. And that's really where that difference comes. So the managing that's required on my end for turnkeys can all be done long distance. And then that really is the crux of this whole idea, is being able to remove yourself enough out of the equation to kind of free yourself up, but you are still involved and have to make decisions occasionally.
Well, one of the beauties of that particular choice of asset class and that style of investing is it actually buys you location independence.
Absolutely. And that's one of the best. And with location independence, not only can you buy outside of where you live and you can chase cash flow, but you can continue to chase the best markets. Like I mentioned, when I started, Atlanta was the best market, no contest. But now it's not. I would rank it pretty far down the list. And so when you have location independence, you can hop from Atlanta to whatever the next best market is to, oops, now it changed again. And location independence, whether you're a real estate investor or anything in your life, the minute you have location independence, I swear your whole world opens up.
I love that. One of the things that we talk about when we're investing, a lot of people tend to focus on the market. They tend to focus sometimes even on the asset itself. But certainly with Turnkey, it starts with the right team, because a good deal badly managed, of course, is no deal. How do you find and how do you really convince yourself you're dealing with the right people?
And therein lies the excitement. I mentioned bad tenants can tank your investment. What can tank it faster is a bad team, especially property management. And so with the turnkeys, fortunately, you're able to verify everything as much as you can about the property before you close on it, which alleviates a lot of risk. I don't want to say that the team doesn't matter, because it does. It's going to change your whole experience if they're good or bad. But you are verifying the property itself, which makes a huge difference. Because if you do it the reverse, like a lot of people do the value add method, which is go in, do all this work yourself, you have contractors, well, that whole time, your money's on the line. So you have to know who your team is. They need to be functioning on and on and on. But with the turnkeys, everything's already done before you close on it. So you have that opportunity to verify it. And then once you get past that little hump, you have the property managers, and that just kind of have to keep an eyeball on them. If everything seems to be flowing fine, the cash flow is coming in as expected, communication for me is huge. I've seen a correlation, and I don't know if this is fact, but the minute communication drops from any of my team members, it's a sign of bigger things coming. Inevitably, when the communication drops, things end up going sour. And so I feel like when people are communicating well, I'm getting the results that I'm hoping for. That's really what I look for, but that is really your main job as the long distance, whether it's turnkey investor or whatever you're doing. But when you outsource everything, that is your job, managing the managers, managing the people, and making sure they are performing. And one of the easiest ways to get around really having to put a lot of effort in figuring out who these people are is ask other investors who they're working with and who they've had a good experience with. To me, that skips a whole lot of research that doesn't really tell you a whole lot. And you can get straight to, who are people having good experiences, because they'll talk about it. So yeah, the team is absolutely critical in this entire equation.
Are there a handful of turnkey providers that you go back to time and time again?
I do, for sure. I work with some guys that they've been experts for well over a decade now in not only market research, but also vetting turnkey providers. And we consult with each other. I really go off a lot of what they talk about. I do some stuff on my own outside of them. But yeah, once you find a good turnkey provider, that's really what I'm looking for. Because in my business, if I send you to a turnkey provider that's terrible, what's that going to do for my business? That's not good at all. So it's very important for me to find the good turnkey providers. And with the turnkey providers, they really are typically set up where they're going to have enough inventory to keep selling for at least a handful of years, if not more. And it's a consistency thing, because if you source properties from all different places, it's hard to keep that quality assurance going. So it's so important to me to find the good, solid people that I can count on I'm not a huge fan of headaches. If you haven't already figured that out, the companies who are going to provide me the fewest amount of headache, I stick with them, because I need that consistency, because I don't have time to vet every turnkey provider out there at all.
We both come from the world of technology. It doesn't matter whether it's aerospace or building microprocessors. There's a critical function that before anything gets delivered, it gets QA'd, it gets tested and verified by an independent team. That's a core concept.
Yeah.
And How do you do that in real estate?
It's all in the due diligence, whether it's you as an investor going to close on a property and you doing the due diligence, like property inspections, verifying documents, checking comps. As me as the business owner, it's due diligence on the companies. Not only do they present and offer solid deals from the get-go, but it's due diligence along the way to make sure they're continuing to perform, because as anyone in real estate knows, who can be a good performer one day can be terrible the next. And it's really, it all comes down to due diligence. And I think this goes for any strategy in real estate, whatever you're doing. It's due diligence. You have to, it's kind of that verify or trust but verify quote, but there's so many things you can verify. And what I love about what you said about tech world and QA and everything gets verified, as you know, just as I do with aerospace, even after all those checks, things can still go a little wonky. And so the best thing you can do is try to verify, do the due diligence on everything you can, so you're minimizing where things could potentially go wrong later. Because in real estate, nothing's guaranteed. And even with the most amount of due diligence, some freak thing can come in and mess up your deal, and you want to just minimize those chances. So it's just keeping that eyeball on things, which is what I really encourage with turnkeys, because turnkeys are often advertised as hands-off investments. And over the years, I realized that people take that a little too literally, and it's not completely hands-off. Your brain has got to be attached to your shoulders. And yeah, just keeping an eye on things.
Have you found any models where it makes sense to actually outsource the QA? If you're not able to do the due diligence yourself, or if that's not your skill set, have you seen models where having a third party perform that due diligence on a regular basis, not just once, but on a regular basis? Have you seen that be an effective part of the model?
I don't want to say that it's not possible, but I've never been a fan of having someone else do the due diligence on my personal investments. And I completely see places where that might be a thing. But I know at one point there was a company who offered quote unquote turnkey properties, and they had it even listed on their website. You don't do the due diligence, we do it for you. And I just grabbed my head and cringed, thinking, even if you're the best company and you're doing the most legit due diligence, it's such a bad message to real estate investors. As a real estate investor, that is the one thing you really, I would never outsource that for myself personally. Again, I'm only in particular strategy, so I could see maybe some other strategies where it isn't so dangerous. But as a real estate investor, I'll outsource just about everything except for me verifying, because we all have to remember this industry is full of humans. And as soon as humans are involved in the equation, anything can happen. And I am cringing even thinking of outsourcing my due diligence. That's my one job. It's like, if I can't even do that when I'm already not doing my own rehabbing, not doing my own landlording, on and on, I would pull myself out of the industry completely. But again, there may be other models where it's not so critical.
Well, I asked the question that particular way, and I actually love your answer. So I agree. There's no way that could be really effectively outsourced. Not if you're putting your own money on the line, and certainly not if you're putting your investors' money on the line. Exactly. That is your job. That is your job.
Absolutely. I'll get pretty heated about that. And even as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, I have employees. Most of the tasks are outsourced, but I'm still in charge, and I'm keeping an eye on things, because you just don't know. You can't expect someone to perform to your standards at all times.
I love it. If folks want to learn more and they want to get in touch, what's the best way?
The easiest way, I actually set up a link just for your listeners. If you go to Hipster Investments /espresso, I have set up, a few years ago, I wrote a Turnkey Rental Properties 101 ebook, and normally I sell it, but I'm going to offer it to your folks for free. And if you get that ebook, when you get on the thank you page, it'll give you all sorts of links to connect with me, connect with the company, and yeah, just reach out, Hipster Investments /espresso, and you can get anything you want from me.
Terrific. And that's hipsterinvestments.com?
It is.
So for the listeners at home, definitely reach out to Allie at hipsterinvestments.com/espresso. Download the free ebook. And in the meantime, have an awesome rest of your weekend. Go make some great things happen. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.